Welcome to Down to Business with V, a show dedicated to bringing you actionable information to help protect you, your families, your businesses, and the community. I'm your host V, and today we're bringing you AI's impact on cyber strategy. We've called in a former military intelligence officer and CEO of a cybersecurity training company to share his insight on the issue. And as always, we'll share what to do if you're a victim of fraud. Stay tuned for that and more. Let's get down to business.
From Atlanta, Georgia, to becoming a United States Marine, to Washington, D.C., and every place in between, everybody calls me V. My goal is to bring you resources, education, and knowledge from sources you can trust that informs and protects to safeguard our families, our businesses, and the community. Now let's get down to business.
Welcome to Down to Business with V. I'm your host V, and today we're discussing AI's impact on cyber strategy. We have in the studio with us via Zoom Dennis Kraft, a former military intelligence officer and current CEO of CyberKraft, a cybersecurity training company. As a Penn State graduate, Dennis served as a captain in the U.S. Army, serving with the 101st Airborne Division. And he was deployed to Afghanistan from 2010 to 2011. Dennis transitioned from military service to a career in cybersecurity, working as a cybersecurity professional for the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Homeland Security, and several private companies. Dennis created training at each of these organizations and won several awards, citing outstanding achievement for his training programs. He founded CyberKraft in 2019 with the mission of bridging the cyber skills gap through elite training courses. Here's my interview with Dennis. Dennis, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, V. It's wonderful to be here.
Absolutely, thank you. And Dennis, just to give our audience a little bit of background about you, your business, your career as a military intelligence officer, why don't you share a little bit about that journey and what you're doing now at CyberKraft?
Well, certainly. Well, I began my career in the military service with the 101st Airborne Division. I was a captain. I was an intelligence officer. After my military service, I decided to get into cybersecurity, and I realized there wasn't a need for an intelligence officer in the civilian sector, so I decided to get into cybersecurity by pursuing cybersecurity certifications. I achieved my Security Plus, my CISSP, several certifications, and I began work as a federal contractor for the Department of Veterans Affairs and several private companies, also the Department of Homeland Security. And throughout my career as a contractor, I ran training programs at the VA for several contracting firms, and that led me to start my own business, CyberKraft, in 2019, with the mission of reducing the cyber skills gap by providing elite security training. So now I help fellow veterans, other cybersecurity professionals get into cybersecurity, achieve their career goals by pursuing certifications, just like I did how I got into the field way back when I started my cybersecurity journey.
Awesome. And Dennis, thank you so much for your service. We certainly do appreciate it.
Oh, sure. No problem.
Yes, I always say it's an honor and a privilege. So tell us a little bit about how you're advising with AI companies and some of the work that you're doing there. What's going on in the AI space in CyberKraft?
Well, the AI space is up and coming. It's booming. With the release of these newer AI models, newest version of ChatGPT, for example. I advise a couple AI firms. I sit on the advisory board for a company called Countera, and I advise for a couple other AI companies who are in the startup phase, the funding phase as well. I mean, with AI, AI has been integral to cybersecurity for a lot longer than it's become on the public radar. I mean, it's been integrated as part of machine learning and XDR solutions, part of SEM devices, defense solutions within cybersecurity, IPS devices. So now it's just starting to get traction. It's getting a lot more attention. And even though it's been in the industry there's a lot more focus on it. So you see a lot of these companies like CrowdStrike and Darktrace, for example, SentinelOne, really pushing their AI, the AI portion of their platform with their marketing efforts. So it's definitely been here already, but now it's becoming more advanced, and we're seeing a lot more of its use now that it's becoming more open source with the attackers. Attackers are able to leverage AI to increase the efficacy of their attacks or to develop new attack vectors, cutting edge attack vectors. It's also being used a lot in social engineering attacks that we've seen. I'm sure you've seen that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The open source nature of it has increased the number of hands it's in, and how it's being used in not so great ways for nefarious uses. So very interesting how you stated that it's been here, which we know that if you really take a look, even from a consumer perspective, at some of the things that consumers use on a daily basis, if you look back over the last, say, 5-10 years, artificial intelligence has been here all along. I've said it, if you've ever called up a customer service platform and you've pressed a prompt, there was some level of machine learning involved in that, in getting to next levels on prompts and things like that. So, it's been here. We look at smart homes and smart devices and smart fridges and smart washers. The intelligence has been here all along, but like you said, it's gaining more traction because of the open source nature of it. So, great point. Let's talk about the risk and adversarial standpoint when it comes to AI. What are some of the risks that you're seeing in your space? You touched a little bit on it, but what are you seeing in your space with cybersecurity as a result of this advent of AI?
Great question. And what we're seeing a lot is that attackers are able to leverage AI when crafting their malware. So sometimes they can use machine learning from an adversarial standpoint. They can place malware on a device or on a system, and then incorporate some machine learning with that malware so that the malware learns the steady state, the common protocols, the common network traffic that occurs on that network that is infected. And then it can start to mimic that behavior to help avoid detection. So by incorporating machine learning with the malware itself, the code of the malware is able to adapt to its environment to help avoid detection by some of these detection technologies that we have. And if you have, the goal a lot of times with attackers, ransomware is still a major concern. So the longer an attacker can have a piece of malware or backdoor in place on a network, the more data they can exfiltrate from that network. And then usually what occurs after that is once they've exfiltrated the data, they perform a ransomware attack. And normally the defense against a ransomware attack is to restore from backup. But the attackers will do what's known as double extortion a lot of times. They'll not only freeze all the assets or disrupt the network by encrypting all the files, but they'll also threaten to release that information to the public because they've already downloaded the information off-site. So it's impossible to just protect against that by restoring from the backups, because the attackers have your data and they can release it.
Yeah.
So that's how the attackers are often successful there. So that's one way in which we see AI helping the malware itself. Of course, it helps. Hackers are very good at sharing information, sharing different pieces of malware. There's oftentimes malware as a service. You have APT, advanced persistent threat groups, that develop malware and then license that malware, much like cybersecurity companies will license protection software. So we have malware companies essentially operating on the dark web, licensing out malware for the use of different attacks. We have ransomware as a service companies as well who specialize in ransomware. And a lot of times these companies will use AI to help generate their malware. We also see this in the form of social engineering attacks. With popularity of ChatGPT, a lot of companies a lot of hackers who may not have been successful in the past performing social engineering attacks because they weren't able to write effective or convincing letters or text messages, things of this nature, they can simply take the prompts or take the conversation they are having with an employee in an organization and put it into ChatGPT and generate a response, giving ChatGPT some prompts, explaining the course of the conversation. That just feed a very realistic sounding either email correspondence or social media chat to the employee, and then that'll often lead to a further exploit. Now, multiple attacks are perpetrated, starting with a social engineering attack, and ChatGPT is not only used by normal people, but it's also used by these attackers to help make those attacks a little more effective, make them sound a lot more convincing.
Yeah, the days of us telling businesses and consumers to look out for misspellings are probably over due to ChatGPT and the ability to put information in and get intelligibly written information out. So yeah, it's definitely accelerated the ability of fraudsters to do what they do. And the other thing that you mentioned, I'm not certain that all of our consumers are aware or our viewers are aware, is that ransomware as a service is something that exists. They sell these packages of technology that's created to exploit a victim. So thank you for bringing that point to light too as well. I know it's something we talk about amongst ourselves within intelligence surrounding threat vectors, but I don't know that the general public is aware that that exists.
Absolutely, and a lot of times these advanced persistent threat groups, as we like to call them, are run just like corporations. They'll have an HR department. They'll be structured just like a traditional corporation, and they'll be, usually their activities are coordinated over the dark web, over social media channels through the dark web. But they'll have board meetings. They'll have, not exactly board meetings, but they'll have leadership meetings. They'll provide compensation packages to their employees to develop these types of malware. And then they license those out oftentimes to other APTs, other threat groups. Sometimes there's a revenue share that's incorporated into that. So if the ransomware is successful, the ransomware as a service group will get a portion of the Bitcoin, of the cryptocurrency. We saw that with the Colonial Pipeline attack. This was part of the reason why the Justice Department was able to recover some of those funds. So yeah, the attackers they're very organized, and they're willing to share their information amongst themselves, usually a lot more than cybersecurity professionals are willing to share information that they've gathered on these threat groups. In the cybersecurity community, everybody wants to make a profit. These companies want to keep their solution proprietary. In the hacker community, information is much more readily shared amongst hackers, in my experience and what I've seen.
Yeah, very interesting point that the people that should be using their resources to guard against these types of attacks are hoarding that information while the malicious actors are sharing it all. So very interesting point. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more with Dennis Kraft, the CEO of CyberKraft, about what's going on with cybersecurity and how you can protect yourselves. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Down to Business with V. I'm your host, V, and today we're discussing AI's impact on cybersecurity and cyber strategy. We have in the studio with us via Zoom, Dennis Kraft, the CEO of CyberKraft. Dennis, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, V. Wonderful to be back.
Yes. So we had a pretty interesting discussion about AI's impact on what's happening in the world of cyber security and the cyber strategy. You spoke in our pre-interview about the human factor in decision making, and you made 2 points. One was about machine design and structural integrity, and then the other one was AI as a tool, not as a replacement. Tell our audience your thought on both of those topics.
Well, it's very interesting. One of the AI firms I've advised for, Countera, their platform is designed to help augment the decision-making process through an AI decision-making tool. So that tool is designed to scan and learn compliance documentation, basically regulations, government compliance documents, and then provide a assisted tool for a decision maker to make a risk-based decision based on that guidance. So, for example, in the military, you have multiple regulations, guidance, orders that need to be adhered to when making any sort of or performing any sort of mission. What this tool is designed to do is to parse that information and provide the relevant topics, the relevant pieces of, portions of the regulation or portion of the orders that pertain to the decision being made. So the decision maker is able to take that into account when making the proper decision. So rather than sifting through thousands of pages of orders and regulations and documents and guidance that have been written and need to be adhered to, the tool is designed to show what portions are relevant to the decision being made at the time, which really helps augment that decision-making process. So it's a decision-making or risk calculation assistant, if you will.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I was at a conference in Boca Raton. It was a financial services conference with American Banker, and one of the vendors there was OpenBots AI, and they have a similar service for the financial services industry, and theirs is around lending. Same type of thing. Instead of sifting through 200 and something documents by hand, this artificial intelligence is able to find the documents that are necessary, ensure the signatures are included, ensure that the information that's required is in that packet, and then a human makes the decision based on all of the information that's there, whether this person is going to be high risk or low risk, or what they qualify for. So very interesting that that there's something like this happening in your space as well. So pretty exciting what AI can do when we use it as a tool and not a replacement for human beings. So great points there. We looked at some very interesting things surrounding third-party vendors and managing risk. And I shared with you a little earlier about the fact that some people feel that because they might not be part of a large organization, or that they're just, in their opinion, obscure or not anyone of note, they feel like they're not a target for cybersecurity attacks. And when we look at third-party risk management, anybody that's connected to a larger organization that might be a target is therefore a target by proxy. Can you talk to our audience about that and the importance of remaining cyber aware and having a cyber strategy in place despite what their position is or how big or small their company is?
Absolutely. And you have to remember, the attackers don't care how large the organization is. If they have tools out there that can scan for vulnerable networks, and if they see one that's weak or vulnerable, they're going to exploit it. They're going to target with ransomware, and it's an easy buck for them. They don't really care so much about the size of the organization. Now, there's some APTs, some high-profile APTs, who will only target large organizations, but that's a small percentage of the number of hackers that are out there. And a lot of times, when we look at supply chain risk, oftentimes it's a smaller vendor or a contractor that's targeted by attackers to then compromise a larger company. For example, the Target breach, which is a little old by now, but it's a classic example of a supply chain risk. That breach occurred because attackers targeted the HVAC vendor, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning vendor, for Target. Target had a pretty robust network security posture. They invested in cybersecurity. They had cutting edge tools at the time, but they allowed their HVAC vendor to have a backdoor into their network. So the attackers were easily able to compromise the network from the HVAC vendor and then just use that backdoor to start stealing information. And that was a huge financial and reputational hit for Target at the time. So no matter the size of the organization, you still are vulnerable to cyber attacks. As we've seen in the recent years, the increased set of importance on CMMC guidance within the Department of Defense, for example. The Department of Defense has put forth, or have really been stressing, updated CMMC compliance using NIST 800-171 controls. And that's designed to protect the DoD against risks from contracting companies. And a lot of times hackers find that they can target federal contractors, compromise those networks, and then gain access to the much more secure federal networks through that contractor link. So that's what the CMMC compliance is designed to do. And that's one of the training offerings we offer at CyberKraft. We offer CMMC compliance. We offer CCA, certified CMMC assessor training, certified CMMC practitioner training, CCP. And we also help firms achieve that CMMC compliance, whether it's level 1, 2, or 3, whatever they're trying to achieve. So it's definitely a major concern, as you've mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely, Dennis, and thank you for going into just the case study around Target. We've seen some other instances of breaches that happen like that, and I was associated with one particular financial institution and advised internally, consulted internally on the fact that one of their vendors had all of their leadership's information, and I said, no matter how great the cyber strategy is here internally, if this third party is ever breached, they've got everybody's information. So great point, and it shows, that's an excellent case study, how if your third party vendor is not fully secure, or if they are a weak link or have a weak link in their chain, it compromises everybody involved. So yeah. And you also mentioned that this was an attack that was in the news, and it was a little bit older. I know you mentioned a little bit earlier that there was a breach recently with MGM. You had been out at Black Hat, which is in Las Vegas, a sponsor and a vendor there for Black Hat, and making that possible for the attendees there. But there was a breach with MGM. Tell us about that breach and what happened there.
Absolutely, and this is a great example that highlights your point. If one portion is targeted, it can cause a ripple effect, cause breaches or loss of availability or breach with multiple organizations. So MGM had a ransomware attack. It happened a couple weeks ago, in September of 2023, and this attack targeted MGM's networks. It was conducted by a group known as Scattered Spider. This is a term coined by CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike likes to name their APT groups. They named this one Scattered Spider. This group normally does ransomware attacks, and they're high-level English speakers. They're primarily based in Europe, and it's believed that a couple of them could be in the United States as well. So they're very well-spoken, clear English speakers who do phishing attacks, voice phishing attacks. They'll do social engineering attacks where they use phone calls to try and trick somebody within an organization to disclose information. What they were able to do is they were able to break into MGM's networks using a social engineering attack. And they were going to originally, there was an interview with supposedly somebody from Scattered Spider. Originally, the intent was that they claimed to target the slot machines and hack those slot machines, hack the casino machines, and get money from them directly. They were unsuccessful in that, so they did a traditional ransomware attack. They used a ransomware as a service group known as Black Cat that we mentioned earlier. So they're usually affiliated with Black Cat. They often use their ransomware as a service with their attacks. So they did a ransomware attack on MGM, and that affected not only the casinos, but it affected the hotel rooms, MGM Grand, Mandalay Bay, where Black Hat was held, the Luxor, all of the casinos, most of the casinos on the Las Vegas Strip are owned by MGM and operated by MGM. So hotel guests couldn't get into their rooms because rooms were all controlled by RFID cards. They had to have manual access for their rooms. The casinos had to write out paper tickets for casino winnings. So it was basically the casinos were on a contingency plan on offline mode. And this obviously affected their reputation. MGM's had a reputation over the past few decades of having an impenetrable network, and this clearly demonstrated that was not the case. So clear reputational impact, a financial impact, of course, and this was just from one little group doing social engineering, most likely using AI-assisted tools to help with their social engineering attack, and it was largely successful.
Wow, that sounds like a complete nightmare. That sounds like a complete nightmare. Dennis, in the 60 seconds that we have left, can you tell our audience what they can do if they're a business owner or consumer, what they can do if they're a victim of a fraud, ransomware type of fraud, or any other type of fraud. What would you suggest that they do and how they should handle it?
Well, don't consult or don't talk to the attacker. Don't engage with the hacker who's given you or who's frauding you in the first place. Contact a professional to help you with the situation. If you're an individual, you should reach out. It's very paying off for ransomware is never usually the right answer, because they may claim that they'll decrypt your files, but your files may be irrecoverable. So it often does not pay. You're going to be out not only of your data, but also of the money that you pay them. So it pays to contact a professional cybersecurity firm to help you in that instance.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dennis. We always say never pay, if at all possible, never pay. It actually funds the people that are doing this malicious work. Dennis Kraft, CEO of CyberKraft, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much, V. It's been wonderful to be on the show.
If you or someone you know has been a victim of an investment scam, a data breach, account compromise, deep fakes, or digital impersonation fraud, be sure to contact your local police department or the FBI at ic3.gov. Also, be sure to visit our sponsor, Vicker Group LLC, business consultants for Generation U at vickergroup.com for cybersecurity awareness training and other resources to protect you, your families, your businesses, and the community. If you'd like to sponsor the show, be a guest on the show, or have show ideas, feel free to contact us at dtbwithv.com. I'd like to thank our crew today, Doug, Suzanne, Stephen, David, Zach, and Jen. We couldn't do the show without you. And I'd like to thank you, our audience, for watching. I'm your host, V. This is Down to Business with V. We'll see you next time.